It was supposed to be a quiet Sunday dinner, like so many before. The roast was on the table, cousins were laughing, and the TV hummed in the background. But then Grandpa stood up, his fists clenched, face red, and voice thundered across the room. "You ungrateful brat! Get out, and don't you dare come back!" The room froze. Forks midair, jaws half open. I looked around, hoping just one person, just one would speak up. But no one did. My aunt looked down at her plate. My cousin kept chewing slowly, eyes wide but silent. And Grandma just looked away, pretending the wall behind me was more interesting than her grandson being disowned. I didn't scream back. I didn't argue. I didn't even ask why. I stood up, as if I'd been expecting it all along. Maybe a part of me had. I walked past the hallway where my childhood photos still hung, past the coat rack where my scarf still rested, into the room that had once been mine but never felt like it belonged to me. I packed a small bag, a few clothes, my old notebook, a phone charger. That was it. I didn't have savings, didn't have a plan, but I had something better: peace. Outside, the night air was cold. My breath fogged the silence as I stood by the gate. I heard no footsteps following me, no door creaking open, no wait, just the wind. I looked up at the sky, stars blurred by tears I wouldn't let fall. I wasn't kicked out because I had done something terrible. I was kicked out because I finally stopped begging for crumbs of love. I stopped saying thank you for things I'd earned. They thought they were cutting me off, that they were punishing me, that without them, I'd break. But that night, something else happened. That was the night I finally understood what freedom felt like. It was sharp, lonely, but clean, like a breath held for years suddenly exhaled. I left that night, but I didn't leave empty forever. When I was 9, both my parents died in a car crash on a rainy highway. I remember the echo of the phone call, the way the social worker spoke gently, and the moment I was told, "You'll be staying with your grandfather now." I didn't know him well. He had always been a distant figure, sharp-eyed, respected in the community, but cold like stone. At first, he opened his doors with what looked like kindness. He told the neighbors, family is family, the boy's blood. And for a brief moment, I thought I'd found a new version of home. But it didn't take long for that illusion to crumble. Every meal I ate was a favor I was reminded of. Every school uniform he paid for came with a speech. "You're lucky I stepped in," he'd say. "Any other man would have left you at the mercy of the system." He didn't hit me. He didn't scream often. But the control was in the silence, in the way he watched me sign my name on school forms with his address, in the way I had to ask before touching anything in the fridge, in the way I always had to say thank you before good night. At age 15, he handed me a debit card. It looked like freedom, but it came with a warning: "This is tied to my account. Use it for emergencies only, and don't embarrass me." I never asked what counted as an emergency. It didn't matter. I was too scared to use it anyway. Sometimes, when relatives visited, he'd say in front of everyone, "That boy eats well because of me." If I wasn't around, he'd be digging through trash cans. Laughter followed those comments. Nervous, uncomfortable laughter. I laughed too. That was survival. You smile with your captor, or you lose everything. I tried to earn his pride. Got good grades. Worked small jobs on the weekends. Saved coins in a jar. But still, I was the charity case. The boy he raised out of obligation, not love. People said I was lucky to have him. But luck doesn't feel like holding your breath every time you open the fridge. It doesn't feel like measuring your self-worth by the value of someone else's wallet. It took me years to understand. I wasn't being raised. I was being owned. And all the while, he made sure the world saw him as the savior, while I sat silently in the shadow of a debt I never asked for. I still remember the email, subject line, "Congratulations." I had been awarded a modest scholarship for a community business course. It wasn't much, just enough to cover tuition and maybe help with a tiny apartment near campus. For the first time in my life, independence felt like more than just a dream. It felt possible. That evening, I made the mistake of sharing the news over dinner. Grandma smiled faintly. My cousin muttered a half-hearted nice. But Grandpa put his fork down with a sharp clink against the plate. "What do you mean move out?" he asked. I tried to explain how I could take evening classes, work part-time, learn to stand on my own. I thought he'd be proud. After all, wasn't this what he always wanted? For me to be less of a burden. But his eyes darkened. He leaned back in his chair and scoffed. So this is how you repay me? After everything I've done, you're planning to run off like I'm nothing. No, Grandpa, I said carefully. It's not like that. I'm just trying to grow. To breathe a little. To breathe, he snapped. Have you ever gone hungry in this house? Slept on the floor? I gave you everything. And this is your thank you. The tension rose like heat in the room. Aunt Bola shifted uncomfortably. My cousin stared at his plate. No one said a word. They never did. Grandpa stood up slowly, his voice growing louder. You've been waiting for this moment, haven't you? Waiting to walk out like your father did. You're just like him. Selfish. Useless. And now you're abandoning the only family you have left. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I'd learned long ago that truth didn't matter here, only obedience. He slammed his hand on the table. You know what? Go. Get out. If you want to leave so badly, then leave. But don't come crawling back when you realize the world doesn't care about you. My hands were shaking, but my voice wasn't. I stood up, quietly. Okay, I said. I turned and walked to my room. Packed what little I had. No one stopped me. No one helped. Not even Grandma. I walked out the front door into the night. No place to stay. No plan. No certainty. Just cold air and the sound of my own heartbeat. I didn't know where I'd sleep that night. But for the first time in years, I had never felt freer. The first few nights were the hardest. I rotated between two friends' couches, both too kind to ask questions, both too broke to help for long. Eventually, I found myself sleeping in my car, a beat-up sedan I'd once polished for Grandpa every Sunday. Now it was my bedroom, closet, and sometimes classroom. During the day, I attended the scholarship classes, careful to smile like everything was fine. At night, I worked part-time at a campus diner, flipping burgers and bussing tables. The rest of the time, I lived in libraries and coffee shops, chasing Wi-Fi and warmth. My clothes smelled like fryer oil and exhaustion. But I kept going. Every small paycheck was a step further from the house I'd been thrown out of. I didn't call anyone back home. I didn't check in. I knew what they'd say anyway. You made your choice. And I had. I chose myself. Not out of arrogance, but survival. I opened my first bank account using my student ID and a $50 deposit. The teller asked if I wanted to link it to a family backup. I laughed, a bitter, quiet laugh, and said, no, just me. That feeling, it was small, but it was mine. I taught myself how to manage money, learn budgeting through YouTube videos, read books on financial independence at the back of the library. I learned how credit scores worked, how to read account agreements, how to file taxes. Not because I had much, but because I never wanted to be caught blind again. Then one day, out of curiosity, I logged into the old emergency debit card Grandpa had given me. To my surprise, it still showed my name. Not just as an authorized user, but as a joint account holder. That discovery stopped me cold. It wasn't charity, after all. He had legally added me for tax benefits, or convenience, or some control tactic I'd never understand. But the bottom line was clear. I was a co-owner. And that changed everything. Because if he had used that account to buy groceries, to pay bills, to hold savings, then legally, half of it was mine. Every lecture he gave me at dinner, every moment he said, you owe me. Every time he pointed at that card and said, I can cut this off anytime. It had always been a lie wrapped in authority. I stayed at the screen, the balance blinking in front of me. I didn't feel vindictive. I didn't feel greedy. I felt calm. I didn't steal. I didn't hack. I didn't touch a single cent that wasn't mine. I simply transferred my share into a new account, mine alone, and quietly walked away. No announcement. No grand revenge speech. Just clean lines and digital clicks. I wasn't taking what wasn't mine. I was just reclaiming what he had once used to control me. I waited until the semester break. My part-time job had turned into something more steady, and I'd started freelancing on the side, tutoring, data entry, even fixing old laptops for cash. I wasn't rich, but I was no longer afraid of missing a meal. For the first time in a long time, I felt stable enough to plan long-term. So I sat down at a quiet corner in the campus library, opened my laptop, and began the process. I moved my portion of the joint account, the amount that legally belonged to me, into a separate trust fund. The paperwork had taken weeks of research. I'd double-checked every detail, confirmed every number. The trust fund would protect the money and ensure it couldn't be touched without my approval. It wasn't just about the money. It was about dignity, about ending the cycle. Then I logged into the bank portal and deactivated the emergency card Grandpa had given me years ago. The same card that once felt like a leash. The same card I'd hesitated to use even when I skipped meals, just to avoid his disappointment. Now, it was mine to turn off. So I did. And then came the final step, the one that made me pause for a moment. I looked through the transaction history. There, buried in the monthly summaries, were small automatic withdrawals, utility payments, service subscriptions, a grocery delivery plan, all linked to that card. All quietly dependent on the same account I had once been shamed for using. He never told me. Maybe he forgot. Or maybe he assumed I'd never touch it. That I'd always be too grateful. Too small. But I wasn't that scared boy anymore. I canceled every recurring payment. Cleanly. Legally. Peacefully. There were no dramatic warnings. No emails. No confrontation. I closed the laptop, folded my hands, and sat in stillness. There was no celebration. No music. Just the quiet hum of the library heater and a soft winter breeze outside the glass. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't stormed in demanding justice. But I had done something louder. I had taken back control. Silently. No one knew what I'd done. No one would. Not until they tried to use what they thought they owned. Not until the card was declined. Not until the subscription stopped. Not until the silence began to speak louder than the shouting ever had. I didn't smile. I didn't feel victorious. Just settled. Sometimes, peace doesn't come from proving others wrong. Sometimes, it comes from no longer needing to. It had been nearly 5 weeks since I moved the money and shut everything down. Life had grown quiet. My classes were going well. I was saving slowly. No more sleeping in my car. I had a small studio apartment now, tiny, creaky floors, a leaky faucet, but it was mine. Every corner of it breathed peace. Then one evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. I stayed at it for a moment. Something in my chest stirred. I knew before I even answered. I picked up. Hello. A pause. Then his voice, unmistakable, sharp as ever, but now tinged with something new, frustration. It's me, Grandpa said. The card isn't working. I'm at the store. This is embarrassing. Fix it. I could hear the clatter of items being bagged. The irritation in his voice. He wasn't used to waiting. He wasn't used to needing. My grip on the phone didn't tighten. My breath didn't hitch. I simply leaned back in the chair and looked out my apartment window, watching snowflakes fall through the yellow haze of a street lamp. I didn't speak right away. He repeated, more agitated now. Did you hear me? I said fix it. It's not going through. There's a line behind me. I finally replied, my voice calm and even. I don't handle that account anymore. Silence. Then I added, almost gently, and remember, you told me never to come back. That landed harder than I expected. Not because it was cruel, but because it was the truth. A truth he had never expected to echo back to him. The line went dead quiet. I could hear the distant beeping of a checkout machine on his end. And then, click, he hung up. No yelling, no insults, no demand to explain myself. Just silence. I sat there for a while, phone still in hand, letting the moment sink in. For the first time in my life, Grandpa had nothing to say. For the first time ever, he had no power left to yell. The silence didn't last long. By the next afternoon, the calls started coming in. Not from Grandpa, but from the family he had rallied behind him for years. The same people who had looked away when I was thrown out now suddenly had plenty to say. First was my Uncle Raji. His voice, always loud and dramatic, came through the phone like a slap. I don't care what happened between you two, he barked. You embarrassed him. An old man, standing in a store with no way to pay. Do you know how humiliating that was? I didn't answer immediately, so he kept going. And after everything he gave you, the food, the roof, the school fees, and you repay him like this. You should be ashamed. I almost laughed, not out of disrespect, but from the irony. Shame was the very currency I had lived with for over a decade. Instead, I calmly replied, everything he gave came with strings. He scoffed. Still, you owe him. I ended the call without another word. Later, I received a message from another aunt. You've really changed. Attached to it were screenshots of group chat messages. Comments like, he stole from Grandpa. He's ungrateful. This is what happens when you give kids too much freedom. I took a deep breath, opened my banking app, and screenshot the account information, the one with Grandpa's name and mine, side by side. I also attached a spreadsheet showing my own deposits over the past few years. Not gifts, not allowances, earnings. Then I sent it all in reply, with a single sentence. Love doesn't come with receipts. But since you brought up the debt, here are the numbers. Read. No reply. A few hours later, Uncle Roger called again, softer this time. I'm just saying, maybe you should reach out. He's old. He won't be around forever. I did reach out, I said, when I lived under his roof. 4 years. No one heard me then. There was a long silence. Then, you've really changed. I looked around my tiny apartment, the heater rattling in the corner, books piled on my small desk, dinner warming on the stove. And I said, without bitterness, no, I've grown. No one called after that. 3 years passed like autumn leaves drifting from one season to the next, quietly, steadily, with a kind of grace I never knew I deserved. I now run a small financial consulting firm out of a co-working space downtown. It started with helping college students budget their loans, then single moms, then older folks trying to reclaim their independence from kids who used guilt like currency. I never advertised myself as an expert, just someone who'd lived it, someone who knew what it felt like to be owned in the name of love. I teach them how to set up accounts in their own name, how to understand what's theirs, and how to protect it. Not just the money, but the autonomy that comes with it. My clients say I have a calm way of explaining things. I smile when they say that, because I know what chaos feels like, and I never wanted to be the kind of man who passed that chaos forward. My apartment is still small. No elevator, noisy neighbors, a leaky faucet that groans when I run the hot water. But every inch of it is mine. There are no invisible strings tied to my bed or my bookshelves. I pay every bill myself. The dishes are chipped, but I wash them gladly. The walls are bare, except for one photo pinned near my desk, not for sentiment, but as a reminder. It's an old photo of Grandpa and me. I'm maybe 10 years old, standing stiff beside him. His hand is on my shoulder, his face as stoic as ever. For a long time, I avoided looking at it. Now, when I glance up, I feel, not anger, not grief, just distance. I no longer need to rewrite the past. I don't crave an apology. I've built a life beyond the echo of his voice. And no, I didn't destroy him. I didn't go public. I didn't humiliate him back. I didn't hurt them. I just stopped letting them hurt me. That's not revenge. That's peace. It was a quiet afternoon at the little cafe near my office, the kind with crooked tables, clinking cups, and the smell of cinnamon and roasted beans hanging in the air. The place wasn't fancy, but the barista knew my name, and they always gave me an extra shot for free. Simple kindness. No strings. I stood in line behind a young woman fumbling with her purse. She wore a wrinkled campus sweatshirt and had the exhausted look of someone balancing classes, rent, and life all at once. She sighed as she counted coins, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "I've got it," I said gently, stepping forward and tapping my card on the reader. She turned quickly, surprised. Then her eyes lit up. "Yo, Mr. Aid, right? From the Independence Fund." I smiled. "That's me." Her hands trembled slightly. "You paid for my textbook fees last semester. I don't think I ever said thank you." "You just did," I said. She smiled, clutching her coffee like it was gold, and found a corner table to sit with her laptop. I paid for my own drink and sat down near the window, the winter sun painting soft shadows on the floor. I sipped slowly, letting the warmth soak in. That girl, wide-eyed, hopeful, reminded me of someone. Not just a client, not just a student. She reminded me of me, of a boy who once stood outside a house that never felt like home. A boy who was told to leave and never come back. A boy who left with nothing but a backpack, an overdrawn card, and a heart full of shame. That boy had no map, no safety net, no assurance. Just silence. And somehow, that silence became his greatest strength. I took out my phone and opened a note I kept bookmarked. A screenshot of my first ever bank balance, 17 cents. I kept it as a reminder, not of how little I had, but of how far I'd come. My phone buzzed with a new email, a request from another young adult, asking for help understanding how to get out of a shared account with a controlling relative. I started typing a response, but paused halfway, looking up at the quiet cafe. I no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. I had no need to explain why I walked away, why I stayed silent, why I didn't yell back. Because I had already lived the answer. I looked out at the street, people walking, leaves tumbling, life going on without apology. And I whispered, just for myself. Grandpa yelled, but I answered with silence. And somehow, that silence said everything.